High grass swayed in the cold morning wind, and a full moon shone brightly in the clear sky. Livia walked along the dirt path, listening to the rustling of bushes around her. The smell of damp earth mingled with the sweet scent of wildflowers, creating a strange feeling of tranquility and unease at the same time. She adjusted the strap of her backpack and held the flashlight tighter, its beam cutting through the darkness ahead. She had left her car miles away, following coordinates scribbled on a yellowed piece of paper found in the declassified files of a retired public official. The message was clear: go beyond the eastern perimeter. Now, as the horizon began to lighten, she started to doubt if her decision had been wise. A sudden snap made Livia stop. On top of the hill, silhouetted against the pale moonlight, Quimbam stood motionless. His eyes shone in the dark, and his voice came low and drawn out. "You shouldn't be here." She didn't reply, but noticed something strange. His right hand was bandaged, and a metallic glint escaped through the dressings. The wind stopped abruptly, as if the world held its breath. Quimbam descended the hill slowly. Each step made the earth groan in an unnatural way. "They monitor the perimeter," he said, stopping a few feet from her. "But you already knew that, right?" He showed her the paper with the coordinates. "This came from the complex." "Who are they?" Quimbam laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "The ones who erase the traces. The ones who keep history written the way it suits them." He pointed to her backpack. "Did you bring the right equipment?" Livia hesitated, then pulled out a modified Geiger counter, a gift from a physicist who believed in obscure theories about residual radiation in dead zones. Quimbam nodded. "You'll need more than that." He took a small device from his pocket, the size of a watch, whose screen flickered blue. "This measures temporal anomalies." "Don't ask how I got it." Livia frowned. "Temporal anomalies?" "Time here isn't linear," he explained, ignoring the question. "Sometimes, past and future intertwine. That's why we guard the perimeter, to ensure nothing escapes." He looked at the horizon, where the first morning light painted the sky purple. "You have 2 hours before the blockade is reactivated. If you want to see the truth, follow the path of stones marked with red symbols. But remember, what you find doesn't belong to this world." He turned to leave, but stopped. "And beware the whispers. They pretend to be familiar voices." Livia followed the instructions and found stones with symbols resembling hieroglyphs, but with precise geometric shapes. The Geiger counter clicked erratically, and Quimbam's device flashed faster and faster. After half an hour, she reached a clearing where the ground formed a perfect circle, devoid of vegetation. In the center, there was a rusted metal plate with the inscription "Project Signals, Sector 9." When she touched it, the ground trembled, and a hatch opened, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. The air grew denser, laden with a metallic smell. She descended, and her flashlight illuminated walls covered in inscriptions identical to those on the stones. At the bottom of the stairs, a corridor forked. To the left, distant voices echoed like a poorly tuned radio. To the right, a constant hum vibrated through the air. She chose the right and found a slightly ajar steel door. Inside, old monitors displayed static images of deserts, mountains, and cities, all marked with coordinates. In the center of the room, a table held dozens of vials with bluish-green liquid, each labeled with dates ranging from 1947 to 2023. One was empty, with the label Sample X9, Contact Established. While examining the containers, a figure appeared at the door. It wasn't Quimbam. He wore a uniform without insignia, and his face was partially covered by a breathing mask. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice filtered and distorted. Livia stepped back, but tripped over a loose cable. Quimbam's device fell to the floor, its screen now red and flashing. The man advanced, but before he reached her, an intense white light flooded the room. When the brightness subsided, Livia was alone. The vials had vanished, replaced by piles of burnt papers. The Geiger counter clicked incessantly. She ran back to the stairs, but the hatch was closed. Trapped, she heard whispers calling her name from different directions. One was Quimbam's. Another belonged to her mother, who had died 10 years ago. The third was an exact replica of her own voice saying, You already knew the truth before you came. She pressed her hands against the hatch, the cold metal resisting every push. The voices converged in the room, echoing in tones that oscillated between pleading and threat. Quimbam's device, now silent, warmed in her pocket. She turned, her flashlight trembling as it illuminated the corners of the room. The burnt papers on the table began to move on their own, sliding in circles like leaves in a whirlwind. One stopped at her feet. Report 127A. Cross-contamination detected. Sector 9 isolation compromised. Before she could read more, the hum in the corridor intensified, accompanied by a metallic click. The door on the left of the fork opened with a groan, revealing a narrow passage illuminated by flashing red lights. She ran, the air growing thinner with each step. At the end of the corridor, a circular chamber housed a structure resembling a telescope, but with lenses that rotated in impossible directions. Beside it, Quimbam awaited her, holding a vial identical to those in the previous room, now filled with bluish-green liquid. "Time trapped in a cycle," he said, without looking at her. "They're trying to erase your tracks, but you've already interfered." Livia pointed the Geiger counter at the vial. The clicking became sharp, almost unbearable. "What is this?" Quimbam turned the container, and the red light of the environment reflected golden particles suspended in the liquid. A sample of what they collected in 1947. It's not just technology or bodies. It's information, memories, stories that shouldn't exist. He opened a compartment at the base of the telescope and inserted the vial. The machine sprang to life, projecting trembling holograms of deserts, laboratories, and distorted human faces. Livia recognized one of the faces. It was the man with the breathing mask. "Who are these people?" "Witnesses," Quimbam replied. "Like you. Like me." Each one saw a part of the truth, but no one can assemble the whole puzzle. A hologram showed a woman identical to her mother, younger, holding a diary. The image lasted seconds before dissolving. "Your mother knew," Quimbam continued. "That's why they silenced her." Livia felt a tightening in her chest. "You're lying." "I am." He touched the telescope, and the lenses spun even faster. "See for yourself." The projection shifted to an operating room. Scientists in protective suits extracted something from a slender body, with long limbs and translucent skin. Bluish-green liquid flowed from tubes connected to the creature's skull. She recoiled, but the hologram followed her, projecting itself onto her retinas even when she closed her eyes. "This proves nothing," she managed to say. "It proves you're being used," Quimbam retorted. "They want you to see this, to question your own memory." An alarm sounded, and the red lights began to flash wildly. The Geiger counter emitted a continuous, almost deafening sound. "It's time," Quimbam warned, pulling her out of the chamber. "The cycle will close." In the corridor, the walls began to shift, forming new paths. Livia ran, but a figure blocked her way. It was herself, dressed in clothes from decades past, holding a copy of her mother's diary. The duplicate whispered, "You always knew you weren't real." Quimbam pushed her aside, shouting, "Don't look at her." They followed a passage that opened into a room with a single observation window. On the other side, the desert stretched beneath the strong morning sun. The steel door was open. "Go," Quimbam commanded. "They'll reactivate the complex in 3 minutes." Livia hesitated. "And you?" He was already retracing the corridor, the vial gleaming in his hand. "Someone needs to ensure the cycle continues." She ran towards the exit, but as she crossed the threshold, the scene changed. She was back in the clearing with the circle of stones, the sun high. The hatch had vanished. Only Quimbam's device remained in her pocket, now cold and inert. In the distance, a black helicopter circled, and a familiar voice whispered in her ear, so low it could have been the wind, "Until next time, Livia." Livia ran towards the helicopter, but stopped abruptly, noticing something strange. The aircraft cast no shadow. Its blades spun silently, and the pilot, visible through the glass, had no face. She crouched behind a rock, her heart beating in time with the device in her pocket. The object, previously inert, now emitted a faint, pulsating light. As she watched, She realized that the symbols on the stones around the clearing were glowing in response, forming a pattern resembling unknown constellations. The helicopter hovered for a few more seconds and then departed, leaving behind a trail of dark smoke that quickly dissipated. Livia remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the symbols softly glowing on the ground. The light from the device in her pocket seemed to synchronize with the pattern of the inscriptions, as if something within her was responding to an ancient call. The wind began to blow again, carrying a sense of urgency and mystery. She knew she couldn't stay there long. The forces at play in that place were older and more powerful than she had imagined. As she slowly walked away from the clearing, she felt a strange certainty that her life had changed forever. The memories that had once seemed solid were now dissolving like sand between her fingers. She had seen things that shouldn't exist, spoken to men who didn't belong to time or space. And worst of all, she had realized that her own story was just a piece of a larger puzzle, the meaning of which still eluded her. As she emerged from the forest, the sky was completely clear, and the world seemed normal again. But Livia knew that nothing would be the same. The device in her pocket continued to pulse, and in the empty streets of the city, where she had once walked without thought, every sound and every shadow now carried a secret. She didn't know if she would return to that place again, but she knew she wouldn't forget what she had found, and that, perhaps, she had no choice.